Good afternoon and welcome to Boston. My name is Trina Crochet and I'm going to be talking today about how to update the bungalow. Projects that I will show you actually are projects that were included in my latest book, Bungalow Style, Creating Classic Interiors in Your Arts and Crafts Homes. This book just was published last year in 2005 through the Taunton Press, and it is full of really good information on people who own these homes, what they can do with them, whether they want to add on to them, whether they want to restore them, or if they just want to know more about the homes that they own. So I wanted to let you know that I am here courtesy of Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar, who generously funded this presentation through a research grant. I am the assistant professor in the interior design department at VCU Qatar. And if you're not familiar with Qatar, it is in the Middle East. And I am here coincidentally on spring break. I happen to own a home, a historic home, I might add, in New Hampshire. So what I'd like to start with is a little bit of a background information on bungalows. Again, I'm sure everyone in the audience is here because they have some sort of interest in bungalows. But it is a very endearing architectural style. And I also categorize it as a truly American invention. The word bungalow comes from the notion of small house. And what I have here on this slide is an example of Bungalow magazine that was first published in 1915. These houses and the style of houses that are considered to be bungalow are generally around the turn of the 20th century, and they remain popular through the 1930s. And then the image on the right side of your screen is showing the new version of American Bungalow magazine that just is a testament that here we are almost 100 years later, and this notion of bungalow is still very near and dear to our hearts. So these houses originated as not quite suburbs of our urban centers, but the outer lying fringes of the city, which is where most people went to work. So these houses are considered to be for the middle class, the working class, middle class, and because of the time period, you don't really see these houses built with garages, okay? This is going to be one of the limitations of the bungalow house. Those of you who own one, you notice, that the lot sizes are very small, very tight, and there's not a lot of room to expand. But it was the quintessential middle-class home. And Sears Roebuck and Company offered more than 400 styles of homes in their catalog. And each kit came with 30,000 pieces of building materials. Each piece was already manufactured or pre-milled. They were numbered, and then this correlated to a manual for assembly. So if we could just go back to these prices, you could buy the kit and the building materials included for $892. Too bad that we can't do that now. So essentially what you did is you buy the kit, and then as you can see here, you build the house. Some of these photos are actually Sears houses, Sears catalog houses that were built in the Chicago area. But bungalow houses were built all over the United States. We have them in Boston, we have them in Denver, we have them in California, we have them in Texas. They are just all over the American continent, which is why I consider them to be the quintessential American style of architecture. So you were able to look through these catalogs. As you can see, here is a page here from Sears Roebuck and Company, and each house had a beautiful little rendering, and then they showed you the floor plans, and then they gave you a description of what you would actually get, and that would be as far as perhaps the finishes that were used inside the home, You also were given a little bit of options so that you could add on. And in this case, this one is considered to be a story and a half, and it's a little bit more expensive at $2,425. But you would order these kits, they would be put on railroad cars, and then these would be shipped to wherever the building site was, and then they would be erected by a local builder that you would hire or contract to then assemble the house. And looking at the image on the right is this actual floor plan of this house, very similar, that again was taken from a Chicago suburb. So when these were built at the turn of the 20th century, the fact that not many people had automobiles is the primary reason why these tend to be on narrow lots with no rooms for garage and no room for even a carport. And as you can see from this original postcard from the early 1900s, this is a new bungalow development in Pasadena, California. So taking a look at this is from the Craftsman magazine. This was a colored illustration that showed what the interiors of these bungalow houses would look like. And here we can see hardwood floors, we can see painted walls, we see the focus on the fireplace, and then the furnishings that go in it, very, very, not necessarily arts and crafts or what we would call stickly style, but a mixture of traditional and then the newer styles of what we call mission and the designs of people like Stickley, okay? So the focal point of the living room is, of course, a fireplace, not a TV. Television culture takes hold in the late 1950s, and then we do see how housing design shifts to accommodate TV watching. And then what we do see in this room is a library table, because the pastime for most American families at this time was to sit around the fire or to sit around these nice Queen Anne chairs that are in the living room and read from a book. So we can get a lot of information from the magazine as far as what these original bungalows looked like. In this example, I'm showing you an illustration again from the Craftsman magazine that shows an eat-in kitchen. And I just love the photo because it is very bright, it's very airy, and what we see in this kitchen, we see modern conveniences like an ice box in the service entry, and then we see a built-in banquette so that perhaps the morning breakfast could be taken into the kitchen. This is our first example in the bungalow house that we have of an eat-in kitchen. And then linoleum for the flooring. And linoleum is something that unfortunately, when the 60s and the age of vinyls and plastics originated, the vinyl floor covering, linoleum kind of went by the wayside until the 1990s, when it was brought back as a more ecological building material, or flooring material, I should say. Okay, so if we take a look at this slide, they were the first houses to be built with an antiseptic white tiled bathroom. Now, bathrooms started to be built into late Victorian houses of the 1890s, but we really look at these bungalows as a truly designed modern house. Living room, kitchen, one bathroom, and then typically 2 bedrooms, okay? The idea of the white tile is something that continues through till the 20s, and then we're going to start to see other colors being used in the bungalow. So here is another example of a living room, these again coming from Craftsman magazine, and we're looking at bungalows that were built with efficiency in mind. these homes thought through the family lifestyle, and they did create in the original planning of these bungalows space-saving devices like ingle nooks, which I have some other slides to show you of those, bookcases, and built-in cabinets. And then what is interesting about this room illustration is, of course, there's the library table dead center with the books on it, but we've got drapes that then close off the living room from the dining room instead of a door. And we have built-in bookcases up against the window. There's a built-in bench. And then, as I pointed out in the slide previously, there is a Queen Anne wing chair, and not everything was arts and crafts mission or Stickley style. Now we know that the table, the library table, and the slatted chair that you see next to the bookcase would be considered mission style, which obviously is a result of the new emerging bungalow. So looking at it in its context is you can't really have an arts and crafts bungalow home without being sensitive to what kind of furnishings you put in it, so that there's not a disconnect between the architecture and the furniture. And of course, as we know, arts and crafts furniture is highly collectible, and if you owned one of these handmade Gustav Stickley pieces of furniture, it would be worth a lot of money. So let's look at some of the details that make the bungalows unique from Victorian. This example is showing you the superb craftsmanship and attention to detail, which is the hallmark of the bungalow style. Even though a lot of these houses were kit houses, that doesn't mean that the craftsmanship was sacrificed. We're using beautiful woods, things like fir, gum, red oak, white oak, and the attention to the way that things are joined together is also a hallmark of the bungalow style. So there's this tremendous emphasis on craftsmanship. And if we look at these windows, no bungalow home would be complete without at least one stained glass window. Stained glass is a holdover from the Victorian period. It did find its way into the bungalow and arts and crafts homes. But here we see two examples. One is the door, the front entry door, where you've got the glass panel in the door itself, and then two side light panels, and then images of windows that also are incorporating this sense of stained glass. And if we notice the styles of these two different examples here, the door is very prairie style, very angular, very geometric, which is what we consider to be Frank Lloyd Wright's influence, who was, of course, very active in the late 19th century and in the 20th century, building his own homes. And then if we look though at the windows, we can see this very free-flowing organic designs, and those are more specifically influenced by the English arts and crafts movement, and particularly the works of someone like William Morris. Okay, looking at other details within the bungalow, we have to be aware and recognize that these were the first homes purposely built with electricity. In the Victorian style that came before the bungalow, you don't have electricity. It would have to have been adapted and wired after the house was built. Victorian houses were accommodating lighting through gas lighting fixtures. So the bungalow was very special in that the wiring was concealed within the walls, and they celebrated electricity with things like chandeliers, wall sconces, pendant lighting. And this particular detail is showing you how beautiful not just the quality of the wall sconce itself and how it attaches to the wall, but the art glass shade that is covering the glare of the light bulb. The bungalow book I have lots of examples of period lighting fixtures. I'm not going to cover it in detail in this presentation, but there are some great examples in the book. And then another characteristic in these bungalows, and I'm not speaking of the kitchen or the bathroom, but I'm talking about the living room. And typically around the fireplace is where you're going to see earthenware tiles with beautiful colorful glazes that provide this kind of textural contrast to the sleek grain of the wood. These tiles are handmade in most cases, and the types of colors that are used in the glazes are organic or tied into nature. And this is what we're going to see in the historic bungalow, is that the colors used throughout typically are earth tones. Okay, so looking at this interior, what we have is when we bring all of these details together, we have an interior that's not only just functional, but carefully coordinated down to the last detail. So looking at this living room, you can see some built-in benches, and then we see the beautiful emphasis on the fireplace. There are these green, variegated green tiles that surround the fireplace itself. And then what I love about this is wainscoting that goes up about 3/4 of the wall with these beautiful dentil moldings, and then this expansive drywall, and then we have this wonderful beamed ceiling that kind of mimics the wood that is on the hardwood floors. And pointing out some of the interior details, the textiles that we see, these are covering windows. There was attention paid to hand embroidery, whether it was window coverings, tablecloths, that sort of thing. And then looking towards the right-hand side, we see a very stickly style chair next to a table with a table lamp. So even considering the houses were electrified, we have a wall sconce on the left, we have a table lamp. These homes celebrated electricity. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the interior colors were inspired by nature. And here we have, dating from, again, the time of the Craftsman magazine, we have a color palette that's been put together for us with this tan kind of beige, this buttery yellow, this forest green, this brown, this deep maroon, then going into red, and how beautiful the combination of these colors are within the interior. Okay, so moving on, this is a catalog page from the 1920s. So even though these houses started in the early 1900s, they do go through a little bit of change. So starting with the 1920s, what you might see then introduced are things like painted woodwork. And looking at this catalog page from the 1920s, here you see that there is some stained wood, but it's very secondary, kind of takes a back seat to white painted wood. So what you will want to do in your restoration of your bungalow, or again if you want to renovate it, is to be sensitive to what was it originally. Was it originally stained wood, or was it originally painted wood? And then go with that, because you can have both. And then looking at this illustration from House Beautiful magazine from the 1920s, it is showing an emerging neo-colonial interior style, which is what we lead into design-wise with housing. This is the particular point in time when the tiny little cape becomes very popular for building the middle-class American home. Okay, so let's look at some examples of real rooms. And if we look at this one, again, it is painted. So even though we have a hardwood floor that's stained, the fireplace mantle, the built-in bookcases around it, even the beams in the ceiling are painted. And what you can do is, in a very inconspicuous spot, is you can kind of test a little area, remove some of the paint, and see what the wood is. Because obviously, if you find quarter sawn oak, or if you find the gum wood or fir, that typically was stained and not painted. But if you find something like pine that does not have a grain, that when you stain it, it just doesn't look very good, then more so than not, the original house, when it was built, that woodwork was painted. Okay, so I did mention that these are the first American houses that were designed to have bathrooms. And again, as we progress into the 1920s, here we're starting to see the influence of the Art Deco style. Art Deco is something that started in Europe, but by the time it reached the US in the mid-20s to the late 20s, by the 1930s, we more or less called it an Art Deco modern style. And that was indicative of the Jazz Age. So what we see in these bungalows in the 20s is they've abandoned the antiseptic white, and they have gone for bright colors and very jazzy patterned tiles. So if we look at the one on the left, this yellow bathroom, those tiles are original. The toilet, the bathtub, and the sink are all original. And once again, most of these images are, the photographs I should say, are directly from the Bungalow book. And then if we take a look at the right hand picture, it is from a magazine from the 1920s. But again, you can see the colors of the bright blue tile with the pink walls, and then you can see the jazziness of the black and how it creates kind of a checkerboard pattern on the floor, and then follows the perimeter of the room and around the tub enclosure. All right, so how can you update a vintage bungalow for a 21st century lifestyle without sacrificing its quiet charm and historic integrity? Making a visual connection between the new and the old relies on the authenticity of these interior details. So these are my tips for updating the bungalow. Know the date of construction, because that is going to tell you, is it early 1900s? Is it in the 20s? Those give you some clues as far as what parts are original and what might have been altered. And then the second point is realize that there are regional differences. I was truly blessed with researching this book. I got to travel all over the country and identify bungalows, go in with the photographer, set up the photo shoots, talk to the homeowners, and see, how they're living in these houses. And from the bungalows that I visited in, let's say, Boston versus the bungalows I visited in Texas, there are a lot of regional differences. And I am happy to say that the book does cover many regional styles. Okay, then the third thing is discover what design characteristics are authentic to the home. You want to work with the authenticity instead of against it. And then understand that bungalows incorporate a wide range of design elements, from the arts and crafts influence, which is more English influence, to the prairie style, which is more Frank Lloyd Wright, and then to neo-colonial, which is where we're starting to see the reintroduction of the small cape as the family home. So looking at these historic photos on the right, the one-car and trolley car lifestyles of the early 1900s resulted in neighborhoods that were very compact with small lots. And even in the picture on the right, you can see how close it is to the houses on either side. So how do you expand? Where do you expand? Most of these houses did not have more than 2 or 3 bedrooms. I don't think any of these houses had more than 1 bathroom. So what we are going to look at are examples, again, from the book on how to find space. So with this slide, finding space for kitchens and bathrooms, I brought in, this is a kitchen from a bungalow in Texas, the most adorable bungalow I've seen. And the homeowners were fabulous. They restored everything in their bungalow rather than replaced. So luckily they had this wonderfully large kitchen. They didn't have to add on to make a bigger kitchen. It was already a bigger kitchen. And what we see here is they have put in a dishwasher, but the kitchen cabinets were originally painted. And so what they did is stripped off all the paint, repainted them. They took all the hardware off. This is all the original hardware. They cleaned it because over the years somebody had painted over the hardware, and then they replaced it. So the wooden countertop that you see is original. The beadboard that you see on the walls are all original. The floor has been replaced, but it has been replaced with linoleum. All right, so this is going to be, again, how do we take cues from what is original and authentic, and then how do we integrate them into a house that we're going to expand? So I'm going to show you a case study that is included in the book. This is a bungalow that was built just outside of Boston. It's actually in Newton, Mass, not too far from here where we are at the Hyatt Convention Center. So this bungalow was built in 1915, and the homeowners, it was basically, you know, mom, dad, and 2 kids. But they really found that the space was quite tight and wanted to expand it. So they hired a local architect to expand it. And also, just to let you know, in my book, the architects and designers who worked on these projects are given credit in the back of the book, so that you can, if you find something in there that you like, you'll have a way to get a hold of them. So what the family wanted, if we take a look at this slide that shows the floor plans before the renovations, and then I'm going to show you pictures of after. But I want to take you through the floor plan because on the first floor, this is a typical layout for a standard bungalow. You come onto a front porch, and then from that front porch, you have a very small entry hall with an ingle nook. Now, an ingle nook sometimes had a fireplace, sometimes had built-in benches. It would be a place where you could come in, sit. It would be a quiet area. A lot of times it would be fitted with bookcases, and it would also double kind of as a reading room. Then once you come in through the entry into the living room, we can see a much bigger space with a fireplace with overhead beams, and then that does connect to the dining room. But we have these built-in, or built-out, I should say, like cupboards, and I have a picture to show you what those look like later, that almost acts as a room divider between the living room and the dining room. So the dining room wasn't completely closed off. This is where they would have had a drapery that you could pull across, as I had showed you in the Craftsman magazine. Then we have what is called a quiet room off the dining room. We have the kitchen. There is our tiny half bath that we see down on this lower level. And then there's a rear porch and then a service entry back to the house. So the picture that I'm showing you is how the changes have been made to enclose some of these spaces and expand the kitchen and get us some more room. And then, of course, the staircase going up to the upstairs. You come upstairs, and here this one was quite large. This one did have 4 bedrooms, 3 pretty decent sized bedrooms, 1 very small bedroom, and then you see here we have only 1 full bath, toilet, sink, tub, and then we have the sleeping porch. So from the photograph, this is showing, of course, as they have closed in these spaces to reclaim space, But originally the sleeping porches were screened in porches, and they would only be used in the summertime so that you could go out there, and when it was really hot, you could maybe try to get a comfortable night's sleep. So here we're looking at the before plan of the downstairs and then the after. So what has been done with this bungalow is you can see where the kitchen was and the rear porch and then the service entrance and then the quiet room. These have been, the walls have been knocked down and these rooms have been joined. So when we look at the photograph, we're seeing a bit of this dining room and to the left this partial wall, and then that is taking in the quiet room in order to get more room into this dining room. And then taking a look at the after plan as well, not only are we going to get a bigger kitchen by enclosing the rear porch, but we're going to use part of the old kitchen to create a walk-in pantry and a mud room, and I'll show you pictures of what those rooms look like. So in order to do this kind of, again, they didn't expand on the house, they didn't have room, they simply reconfigured this existing space of the bungalow to make this work for them and their 21st century living. So what they did is they looked at the original parts of the house, which are these built-ins, and they looked at, again on the plan I showed you that they had beams in the ceiling. They looked at all the moldings, all the beams, the type of flooring that was in the original bungalow, and the new cabinets were carefully matched to the existing cabinets or built-ins that were in the living room, right down to the leaded glass in the cupboard door panels. Okay, then if we look at the kitchen, here's what we have. We have a nice big kitchen, eat-in kitchen. We have modern appliances. The cabinetry is all, again, fashioned after the built-ins that come from the original living room. The family here put in a linoleum floor, so again, we're going back to the same materials that would have been used in these early homes. The only difference I would say is that here we're using some recessed lighting with a authentic period piece, a pendant light over the sink in order to maintain some of the authenticity. And then looking in the opposite direction, here we can see that eat-in kitchen table. We see a very nice refrigerator, microwave, and double ovens. From this view, we do get a glimpse into the walk-in pantry that you can see towards the right. And if I show you this slide, this on the lower left is the walk-in pantry, or sometimes it's called a butler's pantry. And then for the diagram, you can see what is called the mudroom. The image on the right, there was just enough space to do these built-in lockers. And what we can see is the kids can come in, the parents have a locker, the two kids have a locker. There's storage for shoes, there's a drawer, there's overhead storage for winter coats and hats. And it just makes it a much more, again, modern home for living in this house with a couple of kids. Okay, so we're going to be looking at then, again, how do we get extra storage? This couple was very fortunate that they just had to reconfigure the space they had in order to come up with room that they needed. So on the second floor, the sleeping porches that I had mentioned earlier, so on the before plan, you can see the 4 bedrooms, the 1 bathroom, and then the sleeping porches. And the picture to the right wasn't actually from their house, but it is a period sleeping porch to give you an idea of what they would have looked like on this house before this space was reconfigured. So what the couple ended up doing, and we can see it here on this slide, this is the after floor plan. So they simply took the part of that 4th bedroom that was really small. They opened up the space to the first sleeping porch, created a nice master bedroom. They then expanded that little half bath so that the other 3 bedrooms has a bathroom, and then took the other sleeping porch and created a master closet, dressing area, and a master bath. So what I'm showing you in the photo is simply how that master bath came out after they incorporated the space of the sleeping rooms into this master suite. Moving on, so here is an actual home that has still kept their sleeping porches, but what they ended up doing, and you can see the sleeping porch originally, all these wonderful windows to let in the breezes. What these people did in their home is they simply insulated the sleeping porch and turned it into a guest bedroom. So not necessarily having to add on, just simply finding space to put in the elements that they need. And here is another example, finding space for a bathroom under the staircase. So these houses, again, they were usually 2-story or 1.5 stories. You've got a staircase. So this particular example, and I don't know how my photographer was able to capture this shot, but you had just enough room for a toilet and a sink to create a half bath where there was none. So speaking of bathrooms, in the book there's a whole section, a whole chapter devoted to bathrooms. This particular house is one, again, this goes back to bungalow that I found in Texas, and it was more of a mission style bungalow, very, very charming. There's more pictures of these houses in the book because typically I don't just show one room from these houses, but I talk about the bathrooms of the house, the kitchens of the house, how they found space, etc. So you'll see these as more complete projects in the book. But what they ended up doing was adding on. They did have a means to add on, but they didn't add on this gigantic new addition. They kept it small, and it was just added on to accommodate a master bedroom, master bathroom, and closet. So what I'm showing you here is the plan for the bathroom, and they only used 7 feet by 10 feet of space. They were able to get in a water closet, a double vanity, a nice claw-footed tub, and then a step-in shower in that very small space. But taking a look at the wall sconces, taking a look at the window, everything with the new addition mimics what was found in the older part of the house. So the type of windows that you see here, the casement windows, the moldings around them, the type of light fixtures that you see here, all of that was taken from details that were found in other parts of the original house. Okay, so looking at how do we find places to put our clothes. People back in this time period did not have the wardrobes that we have now. The closets in these houses are teeny, teeny, tiny. And when I say teeny tiny, I mean they are teeny tiny. They are only maybe 2 feet deep by 3 feet wide. And you might only get one of those closets in each of the bedrooms. So how do we find space for closets and extra storage? In this example, I'll start with the bathroom. It was very easy for these people, the homeowners here, to simply carve out some wall space and put in these shelves. So that's how they were able to get some extra space. Plus, they relied on some hardware in order to have a towel rack that is actually mounted to the back side of the door and a hook. Then if we take a look at wardrobe closets, starting with the one on the left with the very beautiful rustic terracotta wall color, which would be authentic for the bungalow, what we see is that they have built out from the wall in order to create a closet. So the closet isn't very deep, it's only 24 inches deep. You open these hinge doors and then you would have your fitted closet rod and probably, I don't remember from being in this house, but it's you open up the closet doors and you've got double hanging rods to try to maximize floor to ceiling closet space. And then if you notice, the door, the original door to the house is seen on the right, and you can see that it is this kind of 5-panel door, the type of molding that's used to frame it, and that is what the homeowners mimicked in order to create this built-out closet. Then in the example in the upper right, it's the same thing. It's very similar. We've built out from the wall, flanking a window. This is giving the homeowners a little bit extra closet space. And then the space in between the closets where the window is, they built a window seat. And the window seat is fitted with drawers that actually will pull out, so that gives them extra storage. So in this regard, in all of these examples, they didn't have to add on. They were able to build out from the existing architecture. And then in some of the bungalows, not all of them, but in some of the bungalows, the amount of space that's in the attic can accommodate bathrooms, closets, and even master bedrooms. So in this example, this is not a new addition. This is going up into the attic space and finding space. In this particular example, it's a bedroom, and the bedroom has these beautiful built-ins so that it eliminates the need for a lot of furniture. You don't need freestanding furniture if you do built-ins. And this is something that saves space. And then even in the smallest of areas, just like going back to the idea of the staircase, this particular configuration of the landing didn't really work to put in a bathroom. As you can see, it's very short. It's broken up into 2 landings, but it was giving us space to put in these drawers. So at least that is picking up some extra space, otherwise in a landing that was just void. Okay, and then again, going back to the notion of an attic, this family put in the attic an office that we can see in the right-hand picture. The blue room is an office, and then off the hallway coming up the stairs is a little TV room, reading room, and for the kids. So they've got a built-in window bench, built-in bookcases that are on both sides of the room. It's a very small room, as you can see. And then a TV, and then you've got the club chair with the ottoman to make it a little bit more comfortable for one of the parents. So again, finding space can be by simply repurposing the space that already comes in these bungalows. So this is an example of a front porch that has been enclosed. Many bungalows have these sweeping across the front outside porches. So they already have a roof. They have columns. They have it was actually their outdoor living space. And if you think about it culturally, sitting out on your front porch was something that everybody did. And you would sit there and you'd have furniture and you would wave at your neighbors who were passing by taking their afternoon or evening walks. So that was not uncommon to have an outdoor living space in the front of the house, which is much different today because now we tend to have our outdoor living space in the back of the house. That is something that developed in the 1960s with the ranch style homes. Okay, and then again, finding space for a home office. This family simply used built-ins. They took over a corner of their bedroom and matched again the cabinetry that was found in the original part of the house and did this little built-in desk so that they were able to have a workspace, but again without having to disrupt or add on to the house. And then in this example, we have a family who took over the ingle nook. Remember, the ingle nook was the little room right off the entry that already had the built-in bench and the built-in bookcases, and they simply turned that space into their office. So I want to finish the presentation by showing you an example of a house that has been expanded upon. This is a 1917 prairie style house in a Minnesota suburb. This also appears in the book. And if we take a look at the rear, so the rear is where they made the new addition. They pushed out the back of the house in order to accommodate an office, a master bedroom, down below a kitchen, and then just this kind of little outside room. What they did is they took the clues from, again, the original house when they added on. So I'm showing you the kitchen, and then just beyond that, a breakfast room. These architectural elements, including the glass that you see above the kitchen cabinets, and then it's been mimicked into the breakfast room, is taken from the stained glass windows in the original house. They are very prairie style in the fact that they're very geometric and very linear. The other thing to point out is that the light fixtures, even though they are new, they are historically accurate and are reproductions. The book also gives you references in the back on where you can source a lot of these items. But the homeowners really did a nice job of adding on a big fancy gourmet kitchen, right down to the nicely incorporated wine rack into the kitchen island, but they did it with sensitivity, like this example of that breakfast room with the millwork details, the pattern that you see on the ceiling, the stained glass that you see in the upper portion of the wall, and then the built-in that you can see in the on the right wall over in the corner. So keep in mind when you add on with creativity, but again, take the cues from the original parts of the house. This is a kitchen that has been added on, but as we know, the house would have been in the 1920s because we know that by the fact that the woodwork was painted. So this kitchen that has been added on is very charming. It's kind of a mishmash. You've got open cabinets plus glass front cabinets. You have hardware that is reproduction hardware, but based on original hardware, just like the original kitchen that I had showed you. And then what is really quaint about this eat-in kitchen is that they have added a plate rack above the door and along the little area where you eat, and above where the microwave is, and that plate rack is to show off some of their collectibles. So in closing, after all, things aren't like they used to be, even though we see this wonderful, I love this old photograph because this is one of these bungalows being built on a block, and it's the first one on the block. This one a little bit larger, as you can see, it has a porte-cochere to the left, and then the images of the interior, the women sitting in the banquette having their morning coffee and a chat with the neighbor, and then the kitchen itself, which worked perfectly fine for them during that time. But we are looking at the 21st century and how these bungalows are even better. So thank you very much. I want to give credit to my wonderful photographer, Randy O'Rourke, Doug Keister, who also provided a lot of photographs for the book, and of course, the Taunton Press. Thank you very much.